creating an awareness and empowering them to then make these arguments, and also providing them with the policy references and the legal framework that can support those arguments in order to strengthen them appropriately. Like one example is in Kenya, it is a requirement by the regulatory authority that the PI is resident in Kenya. So what they will ask to see is a practicing license from the Kenyan, licensing body to ensure that that investigator. So actually, the arrangement ends up flipping. Even though you have a chief investigator who is from the global north, the actual directive authority is the local PI in terms of the regulator. So then the chief investigator becomes almost like a co-PI. Direction and everything is from the local PI, which is now a requirement. So for us, that helps with making our case and also advocating for full responsibility as a local PI, instead of just taking direction when local context sometimes is not taken into consideration. And then another aspect of support is our local institution also requires that when we are dealing with materials that are being transferred, our material transfer agreements, it is an institutional policy requirement that there must be evidence of capacity building. And where possible, you are advised to budget in advance for a local resident to then go abroad if samples need to go abroad, learn the technology, and facilitate a way of transferring that technology back home. And recently, we've also strengthened this by ensuring that even if samples go abroad, there's always a copy maintained locally. Because again, there's that drain of samples that were collected. And again, it's a burden on participants to have and collect samples where they were already there, but you no longer have access because they were all shipped abroad. And once funding ended, access or facilities to ship them back is not available. So again, there's been a lot of strengthening at an institutional and national level, so that at least now we are at a stronger point of negotiating our place. And again, that helps us facilitate when it comes to discussions about IPR. All those things have been embedded in advance. We have documentation and record keeping in place so that we know we can reference contracts, we can reference protocols and everything that was written in advance. And that really helps with putting forward these applications when the time comes.
Okay.
That's so key. Sorry, just before you move on, I'm so sorry. I know we're monopolizing a bit, but I needed to just say something. So, I mean, it's so what you said about all the protocols and the SOPs and, everything, governance being in place is so key. And that's something that our current Vice Chancellor, Professor Shade Ogunshola, the first female Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos, she's the one that championed even having the research office at the college when she was the provost of the College of Medicine. She's a clinical microbiologist and fantastic researcher. And she's the one who championed this, setting up of a proper research office in the college. I mean, people think, we always think, oh, why are we wasting time on these other things when we can just do it? But the truth is that you don't just do things. You have to actually have so much structure. And that is what the Global North has over us, if you ask me. The idea of having structure for everything. So she said that had that set up, and she also is the one that, as when she was Deputy Vice Chancellor, Management Services, Development Services, set up the intellectual property units in the University of Lagos. So UNILAG also has all these things in place of ensuring that, all the documentation is there and things are done properly. I'm not speaking for Nigeria, but I know that definitely has made a big difference for the University of Lagos. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. So what I hear is that policies, structures, and champions are very, very important in ensuring that we get the best out of these interactions and stuff. So I would like to move on to a very important question, and I would like to invite three of the panelists to give it a shot. Dr. Oniyire, Marianne, and Professor Afolabi, and also Joseph. So it's been argued that intellectual property in some cases is counterproductive to universal access to public health on the continent. So how is IP limiting public health access, and what can we do differently? So let's start with the IP expert. Joseph, maybe thoughts, maybe just briefly. Then we move on to Marianne and then to Dr. Oni Ire. I'm really having a tough time with the name. I'm sorry. Okay, Joseph, if you're still there.
Yes, I'm here, Dr. Neba. I was also just getting confused because, you know, there are two Josephs on the panel today.
No, I qualified that the IP expert.
Yes.
I know the other one is the innovator, so we're still coming to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just be brief, and I think your question goes to whether the IP laws could be limiting, you know, access to health
to public health. Yes.
in the continent. I personally think that they are not. What I think is happening is that there's a lot of, for instance, research. I really come into interaction with a lot of, you know, I follow the monthly industrial property journal where patents, utility models, and so on are advertised before the certificates are issued. And you do see a lot of health-related patents, utility models, so many things happening there. But what I do think is that many people do not know about what needs to be done from a legal standpoint in order to bring those to the fore. So if you are not in Kenya, if you're not aware of the monthly industrial property journal, you wouldn't know where to look to have an idea of what's happening in innovation in the public health space or anything that could fit there. And beyond that, we also don't have a lot of information about how to commercialize. So a lot of the public health related patents and utility models that I see come out of research. Professor Afolabi has talked about, you know, herself being a researcher and a lot around that. So we have a lot of patents in the health space and public health related patents coming from universities and other research agencies. Their advertised certificates are issued, and I feel like they just go back to their certain institutions, universities or whatever, and sit there. But there is actually procedure to license those patents and make money for the universities themselves, for the researchers and innovators. And perhaps there's a disconnect between, you know, once you get that certificate and have your patent registered in public health and taking it one step forward to license it out to someone who can actually commercialize that. But just to finish, I think that perhaps apart from the lack of knowledge amongst practitioners, researchers, and really the market itself, there could be an argument for a situation where all of us are not really willing to put this information out. A lot of universities want to keep those innovations that they've registered for themselves. So sort of to have the bragging rights, if I can use that informal term, and not bring that out into the public. So there isn't much that the law is really inhibiting, apart from us who know the law and the institutions that really have the law, bringing that to the fore, sensitizing everyone out there, innovators, researchers, players in the market like pharmaceutical industries, government, and bringing that together. And perhaps there could be an argument for a kind of a platform, perhaps online or in another fashion, that allows for this exchange of information, exchange of ideas, and commercialization to take place. I think I'll end my personal opinion at that point and hand it over to you, Dr. Neba.
Thank you. Dr. Faith Oni-Ire, let's hear from you, and especially from a government's perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. It's nice to be part of this great panel discussion. I have my prof there. Okay, so talking about intellectual property, we just started something here at the Lagos State Ministry of Health. We want to establish the intellectual property desk. And that is because we have lots of research going on. In fact, think about the, I think, well, yeah, 2020, during the COVID era, we did a lot there in the public space. It's there in the public health space. It's there all over. The findings, everything. Then we start down. We have done a lot of work. What do we do? Again, we have to note something. Once you publish, there are some things tied to it. You cannot say you own it anymore. So what do we do? At that point, APHRC came on board. I think it was by 2021 we started talking. Then by 2022, we made their intention known. By 2023, July, we had this stakeholders meeting where we told them that we have lots of research work out there. What are we going to do? We discovered new things. How do we go about, what are those things that we discovered? And can we patent them? And so the discussion started and we had that meeting. So what am I saying in essence is that intellectual property is not hindering research. However, there is low awareness. People are not aware of what they have. As researchers, we have the power. What is research? We are trying to find out something that is not clear to us and to make it clear. At the end of the day, we have our findings. And what do we do with it? Professor Afolabi said something, and I noted it down, that most times, malaria is one of our major problems, okay, like sickle cells, he said, but we do get grants to do some other things. Which are not really relevant to us. Grants to do some other things which are not really relevant to us. And at times, when we discover these things, when we identify new things, we don't know what to do with them, then somebody will just come from somewhere and invest and take it away from us. And so we have lost it. Another aspect that the lawyer spoke about just now is the commercialization. It's fine to patent, but the commercialization aspect of it is also key. And somebody once said, yes, it's good to have grants, but when you do research and you find out new things, innovation, creativity, you are creative, you are creating things, and then you patent, you have your rights and everything, that such a person, you are actually fulfilling or, you are attaining the sustainable development goals. Because the number one sustainable development goal is no poverty. And once you are able to patent something, you are leaving the realm of poverty. So with that, I don't think intellectual property can hinder public health research. Rather, I think we need to create awareness. And that is why we are trying to do something at the Lagos State Ministry of Health. We had a 2-day workshop to create awareness. And, people were like, okay, so what's the next step? What do we do? I've done this so many research work. They are not, there's nothing to show for it. Just to put it lightly, to show for the research work. Being a professor, you have written so many theses. Here and there, intellectual property that's created with sensitize the people, create awareness, and also help us to commercialize. Commercialization is very key when we are talking about IP. It is very, very key. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you. Marianne, your thoughts on IP being, in some cases, considered to hinder access to global public health?
So in terms of being if Africa, we're looking at it from the perspective of being the innovator, I agree with the comments from Joseph and Dr. Onyere. In terms of understanding the requirements puts you in a good position to commercialize and exploit these opportunities. Now, when we are on the receiving end, I do have a counter argument to that. As we saw in terms of the progress in terms of research within COVID, this was very quick. Some of these platforms had been established in other countries and not localized in Africa. I'm speaking about, for example, mRNA technology in terms of vaccination. It was not new, but it was not really available in Africa. And we did contribute to a lot of research in that space. But because we were not, should I say, not very forward-looking or not very proactive with our established partners, we had not considered embedding within our collaborations aspects of equity, aspects of strengthening things like TRIPS within even our contracts, and also looking forward to, if these situations arise, what are our roles and responsibilities as established collaborations? What resulted was that there was a lot of technology that was not able to be transferred because there were a lot of patents that could not be exempted. TRIPS had to come in, but even that brought a lot of contestation from existing patent holders. And even till now, there's a whole paper that was written on just the challenges of patenting and tech transfer, just specifically in mRNA and specifically with COVID vaccines. We have not even looked at other platforms or other disease areas. And there was a whole web diagram, spider diagram, of all the complexities, the heat map of the different patents that are held, not only patents in products or processes, but also trade secrets and proprietary information that could not be shared. And I feel this really impacted the African continent in terms of the fact that we were not embedded in that area of work, and we could not propel and progress some of the work that we've done. This also sometimes is the feature that we see when we have a product, but we do not have capability to produce it locally. So we have inventions, we have candidate vaccines that have been generated by Africans, but we need to then have a licensing agreement in order to do larger scale or even proof of concept clinical trial manufacture. We need to outsource this to other partners. And then in these negotiations, we end up losing a lot of our proprietary rights because we're not considering patenting, or the information we have contributed to thus far does not constitute something that is patentable. So those are my, devil's advocate side of view, and also the supportive side of view where, yes, in terms of us being the innovator, there's a lot of opportunities. We can leverage that. We can generate funding to have a stronger financial position. But in terms of the other side, when we're talking about global collaborations to hasten, especially in response to epidemics, sometimes we are on the wrong end of the stick. Over.
Okay, thank you. Let me now seize this opportunity to invite Joseph Githiru to share his experiences with us on his personal journey or lived experience as an innovator in Kenya. So Joseph, tell us what your experience has been in terms of patenting the HYPACK and the solar dryer process and technologies, the cost. Just share with us and some of the challenges that young Kenyan innovators face in patenting and protecting their innovations, and what can be done differently. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alphonse. Good morning, afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Joseph Githiru. I am an Obama leader and 40 Under 40 Africa. But in this particular context, I've been asked to talk about innovation and what we've been doing at my startups. And I'd like to go into that. So first of all, I agree with almost every sentiment that has been mentioned by the previous speakers, including Marianne and what you've just completed to mention. It's really insightful. So my name is Joseph Githiru, as I mentioned. Currently, I run 2 startups. One of them is called HYPACK. At HYPACK, we are converting water hyacinth into biodegradable plastics. So basically, we're using one problem, which is water hyacinth, and it's the world's most problematic aquatic weed, to solve another problem of plastic waste pollution. And my second startup, which was not included in the bio for this one, it's called MC2. At MC2, we are using AI technology. We are leveraging on AI as an early warning system for illegal logging, that's deforestation, charcoal burning, and wildfires. Currently, we are running that in some forests in Kenya in collaboration with the Kenya Forest Service. So my experience in patenting processes has been a bit, honestly, not a walk in the park. And I hold some views that have been mentioned by Marianne as well. Because the thing I think about innovations and patenting and all this is that they should be people-centric. If patenting is okay, but if it does not lead to the changing the lives and livelihoods of people and communities, or if it does not lead to commercialization and monetization, I think and it only stays on paper, I think then it's probably useless. So the very first innovation that we had that you've mentioned was on a solar dryer that is now being used by pyrethrum farmers to revive the pyrethrum farming in Kenya. So part of the reason why pyrethrum farming failed in Kenya in the 80s and 90s was because it was getting expensive for the industries to dry the pyrethrum flowers and into the right degree of hardness and moisture content that was required. So when I was in campus a few years back, I came up with this solar dryer that is now being used by now farmers across the country. And I happened to work closely with the Pyrethrum Board and some other US-based agencies. And that was the very first lesson I had in patenting, because I didn't get to patent it, so I had it as open source. A few months back, I was watching television just randomly, and I saw these farmers saying tunashukuru serikali kwa kutupatia hii kitu, which translates roughly to we thank the government for giving us those solar dryers. But the thing is, in the spirit of collaboration and accelerating the whole progress, and I didn't get to patent it fast. So first the speed and the number one, the fast. What happened is that other people got in, and it was taken over by almost everyone else, which no regrets on that though. So on the second, so when I was launching my startup, the HirePack one, I was a bit aware of it. So in collaboration with Kipi, which Joseph and your team are doing some amazing work, I got to have at least the very first patent that I had, which was on the whole hyacinth processing and what we are doing about it. And when looking back into what's working for innovators and for the startup scene, at least in the continent, I've been privileged to engage with a number of top startups and innovators in the continent. And I think the best mix has been one that has patents, trademarks, and copyrights. And it's been a bit challenging for us because when we have continuous improvements and executions, then you get to a point where your first patents are not necessarily what you had, are not necessarily holistic and do not disrupt the markets enough as what you're doing currently at the moment. And what is working for startups is when you accelerate the whole progress of innovation and commercialization, you tend to bring in brand loyalty and strong company culture and strong marketing culture. So what happens is that consumers get to know you, and you don't necessarily have to rely on patents to sell your products and to go ahead with what you're doing. And so on my second startup currently, the MC2 one that you're dealing with AI, again, a lot of AI technology has been researched from the United States and not here in Africa. And I have a feeling that you're being left out of the AI race, and we are having to play catch up on that. And so the thing about it is that a lot of models that we are having on large language models and so on AI are already open sourced. So you can't patent something that's already open sourced. And so what you have is you have to bring in a new aspect of whatever you're trying to do, and try to put it in a way such that no one else has tried to figure it out, and trying to make it, upscale it in such a dynamic dynamic way that brings both effectiveness in terms of the product and brings meaning in terms of how it goes to impact people and the society in general. So yes, that's my story in this context of innovation and patenting.
So
Thank you so much.
Tell us, thank you very much, Joseph. Tell us, how much did it cost you to obtain your patent? How many patents do you have, and how much did each of them cost, and how long did it take? Just rough, if you don't have the, yeah.
Okay, yeah, rough figures. So I think the good thing that we have in the Kenyan space that KIPI has implemented is the provisional patent. So obtaining a provisional patent costs I think about 1,000 shillings if the costs have not been raised. Getting a good patent costs I think 3,000 shillings or something. And now the duration for getting a provisional patent, it takes a couple of days. For getting a patent, the full patent, it takes a really long time, because they have to do their background research. They have to put in these assessors who go to check what has been done previously and what is being done right now, and so on. So far, I have 2 of them under different brand names. And again, it's not been such a walk in the park. We've had to bring in a couple of experts to try and help us on the same, because this is not typically something that you're not taught in an undergraduate class, and you don't have it in your curriculum. So you are thrown into the deep end, and you have to learn how to navigate it on your own.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me just post one more question to our participants from Nigeria and from Kenya, so they can answer based on their perspectives from the 2 countries, and then we can open the discussions up for questions from the attendees. So let's just think of the trends in the patenting and commercialization of health innovations environment in Kenya and Nigeria. So what are the awareness levels of intellectual property rights among Kenyans and Nigerian innovators? And what are some of the key process or systemic challenges that they face in order to maybe get and use patents? So I'll just leave it open. We can, of course, our IP specialist, Joseph Amisi, would be a good start.
Thank you, Dr. Neba. I'll just run through some challenges that I myself have faced as a practitioner. And in doing that, I'll pick up from our innovator who's just left off. And that really goes to sensitization. That's the point that I'd like to start with. There isn't, in my view, enough knowledge about the laws and the procedures. And especially when it comes to patents, as we are focusing on patents and more specifically in the health area. In Kenya, when you look at the Industrial Property Act and the regulations there, and there are such very detailed requirements when it comes to drafting a patent. For instance, the size of the font, the spacing, down to numbering of different lines as you're drafting a patent. How to present it, the description, the claims, the drawings, and then to fill out the forms and make sure you have 3 copies of each. I think that's a little bit too technical for the everyday inventor, and that really lends itself to people like myself who studied law and can take the time to really look at it. So I think there need to be some forums where people like myself as patent agents, KIPI itself having the patent examiners there, they're very helpful. Our innovator just spoke about going to KIPI, and I'm sure in his, as he was approaching them, just asking them questions, asking for guidance. That's another helpful area where knowledge about the technical aspects of a patent and what to do can be gained. But I think there's more that can be done, and forums such as this bring it to the fore, and we can now take it offline to more detailed training programs and things like that. Another big challenge that we face from the innovator and practitioners perspective is commercialization. Again, I'll just say that commercialization involves perhaps licensing. You don't have to sell your patent outright. which is the other way that you could commercialize it. So, you could still own it, but give a license to someone under certain terms, under a contract, and let them commercialize it, bring it to market, and you get some money out of it. I don't think there's much knowledge about licensing in Kenya specifically. There was a study carried out, which I was a part of, between KIPI and the Georgetown University in the US about 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago. And we found that since 1930, or early 1930s, when there was patent law in Kenya, there was only one registered licensed patent. When you license a patent, you need to file some documents at the national office. And we only found one. And I'm happy to say that was one that I did, in terms of drafting, getting the certificate and licensing out. But I was the only one who took the step that the law requires to register it. I'm sure there are many others out here, party to party, but they've not been registered. And so, that brings up another question. Are you breaking the law? Is the law too stringent? Is it trying to stop you from getting into a private commercial contract with somebody else? But I think that's yet another area of challenge, the commercialization, and there's so much that we can discuss around that. I would not go into it. In closing, I'll just speak about efficiency of filing applications. Here in Kenya, when we are doing patents, we still need to take the physical documents. You draft your patent, you print out the form, and you actually have to take a whole trip to the patent office at KIPI to lodge it and all that. In this day and age where there's so much going on in terms of using the digital platforms, I think that is something that we can improve on here in Kenya, because you can see it happen at the regional level, the continental level. ARIPO has an online system that works. The World Intellectual Property Organization has an online system that works. And on that point, I do see that our office, KIPI, has kind of redone their website over the last 2 to 3 weeks. My personal hope is that they are moving towards setting up that platform for us as practitioners in the legal field, and for innovators in general to be able to step up there and just put in your application and follow it online for ease of prosecution. Lastly, I think enforcement is another challenging area, and our enforcement bodies here in Kenya, the Anti-Counterfeit Authority, and on copyright, we have the Kenya Copyright Board, both of which link into the Kenya Police and other investigative agencies. I believe a lot more can be done to kind of sensitize people about counterfeit goods. Any other aspects when it comes to patent, you'll be talking about infringement and the legal steps that can be taken to secure your intellectual property. Moderator, Dr. Neba, I think that's enough for me for now, so I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then maybe Marianne, just tell us what you think are the challenges within the research community as far as IP and patenting is concerned.
I think a lot of it is awareness, being aware of what is available to them, and then planning early enough to take these into consideration in terms of negotiations when conducting research, planning for the future. So having a longer term research strategy that outlines what the scope of this research is beyond just the project. And then also having supportive policies, governance structures to be able to support their negotiations. I'll leave it at that and let others also comment.
Okay, so let's hear from Dr. Faith Oniire about the Nigerian experience. I note that Professor Afolabi had indicated that she was going to drop off at 4. So I suppose she's already done that. So Dr. Faith Oniire, you now carry the Nigerian flag. So tell us.
Okay, thank you very much. For us in Nigeria, yes, the awareness is low, very low. People are not aware of what they stand to gain or something for anything. They are not even aware about intellectual property. Most researchers are not. And that's one thing we discovered when we had the 2-day workshop. The people were not really aware. And so we need to do something about sensitizing the people. Another thing is that, you see, when people conduct research, they need to be intentional about the research. They need to be intentional. Now, you want to conduct a research, you need to, you know, identify what do I want to do? Now, what do I want to do with my findings? And the research we are going to conduct must be new, maybe generate something new. Find a solution to something. Because if not, then, so we are not telling people to be intentional. Now you want to conduct a research. Are you intentional? What do you want to gain from this research that you want to do? So that you won't say, oh, I've discovered something. And NOTAP, because we have an agency called NOTAP in Nigeria that they do register our patents, and say, no, NOTAP is against me. They don't want me to register it. It's not that, but because it's not something new. So that's another issue that researchers will say, oh, they are not registering my products or stuff like that because it's not new. So we are telling researchers, you need to be creative, you need to be intentional, and you need to be creative. Again, data. We need to be able to use our data to inform policies, make decisions. Knowing our data culture is quite low. So we need to be able to do something about our data, and then the financial support to actually conduct this research is another challenge that we have. So if we can work on our awareness, if we can support research, and then if we can do relevant research, I think then all will be well. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much. I like the phrase relevant research. That's very, very instructive. It's my pleasure now to open the discussion to the attendees for any burning questions they may have. But before we do that, I see there's a question on the chat. I suppose Joseph Amisi would be best to answer this one. It says, let me see, there is usually, no, not that, I think there is the issue of software development. Now it's scrolling down. There is usually a clause in consultancy agreements that all IP will be owned by the hiring firm. Would the law allow a consultant who has signed off IP rights to reclaim these when the product has been commercialized, or they will remain bound by the contract they signed?
Thank you, Dr. Neba. I'd actually seen that question on the chat earlier and responded to it. I believe it was asked by Joseph Wangombe, but I'll just go very quickly through my answer to Joseph Wangombe for the benefit of everyone else here. In Kenya specifically, when it comes to software, and we could have software that really brings out some good in public health, and so I think I can address this quickly. Software falls under copyright in Kenya. In other jurisdictions, code and software may fall under patent, for instance, in the US and I think in the UK and other jurisdictions. But here it falls under copyright. And the principle, there's a principle in intellectual property and a lot in copyright known as the work for hire principle, WFH, where when you contract someone, for instance, if I contracted Mr. Wangombe to develop some software for me, and we have an agreement where he's giving me those services, then he's considered to benefit from the fees that I pay him under that contract. But the product of the work that he's doing for me, the work I have hired him for, the intellectual property becomes mine. And so I think it's really important for sensitization again to anyone who's getting into such contracts, people with the knowledge, the skills to work on software, come up with code, and create things for public good, public health, and any other areas in the intellectual property space. And also just to make sure that they are very keen at the contracting phase. Because once you've entered into a contract, that's a civil agreement between the parties. And later on, if you wanted to regain your intellectual property, you probably have to demonstrate that you are forced into that contract or lied to or something like that, which is very difficult. So it's better to get into contracts from a point of knowledge and to seek expert advice wherever there are any questions. It goes even down to just visiting the country office at KIPI. If you probably couldn't see a lawyer or can't afford one, you can visit KIPI. For software, you go to the Kenya Copyright Board, and then I'm sure they're willing to walk you through understanding what you might be getting into before you get into a big mess. I think that's where I'll leave it, and back to you, Dr. Neba.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Questions? I hope we are tweeting. I hope we are on LinkedIn. Yes, the word must go out. IP is very, very important. It can make instant millionaires from the work we do. So don't lose the opportunity by not being aware. So you can just speak, unmute your microphone and speak, or lift your hand. Let's see how we go. Audience. Usually, when there are no questions from audience, it means the panel has done a great job. That you can never doubt that. Okay. Oh, somebody says they don't have the right to ask. So how do we do this? My APHRC team, maybe you can advise.
Thank you, Alphonsus. We managed to respond to the questions in the Q&A section. Our panelists were gracious enough to go into detail to respond to those questions. So I think that's all from our end. Yeah.
Okay. So I believe when were we supposed to stop? Are we over time or still have some time?
We can wrap up now. Thank you.
Okay. So fellow participants and our panelists, I think it's been great engaging with you on this topic. Yes, what has come out clearly are issues around lack of awareness, maybe structures, champions, policies. There have been quite a number of them. But I believe that we have started the conversation. We don't have to wait till the next 26th of April 2025 to revisit this. I think we can tweet about it. We can be provocative on X, or X formerly Twitter, on LinkedIn, and just keep the conversations going, especially within our research institutions on the continent. And why not within the research, within the innovation, the broader innovation ecosystem on the continent. So I want to take this moment on behalf of the African Population Health Research Center and the Catalyze Impact Initiative, which is one of our major programs, to thank you profusely for making the time to honor our invitation and for the exciting contributions that you have given. We will be in touch. We'll continuously engage, and I hope that we can make Africa a much more better place than it is today through intellectual property and intellectual property rights. So thank you very much. And you all enjoy the rest of your day, and so long.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Fun.